In the turbulent era of the late 1950s and early 1960s, the United States found itself facing an enemy that wasn't a foreign power or a visible military force but a deeply rooted domestic network, organized crime. The Mafia, also known as La Cosa Nostra, had quietly infiltrated labor unions, corporations, politics, and even law enforcement. Few dared to challenge it head-on. But one man did, Robert F. Kennedy. As Attorney General of the United States, and long before that as Chief Counsel for the Senate Rackets Committee, Kennedy emerged as one of the fiercest opponents of organized crime in American history. His crusade against the Mafia not only reshaped law enforcement but also cemented his reputation as a relentless advocate for justice and integrity in government. Robert F. Kennedy's fight against organized crime didn't begin in the Justice Department, it started on Capitol Hill. In 1957, the Senate Select Committee on Improper Activities in the Labor or Management Field was established to investigate corruption within labor unions. Kennedy, serving as chief counsel, worked alongside Senator John L. McClellan to expose the deep connections between union leaders and organized crime. The hearings, which were broadcast nationwide, revealed shocking levels of corruption within some of the nation's most powerful unions, including the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, led by the infamous Jimmy Hoffa. Kennedy's sharp questioning, moral conviction, and determination made him a household name. He wasn't afraid to confront Hoffa, a man who was both admired by workers and feared by his enemies. The two clashed repeatedly in public hearings, where Kennedy accused Hoffa of using union power for personal enrichment and maintaining ties to mobsters. Their exchanges were electric, Kennedy calm yet piercing, Hoffa defiant and smug. The nation watched as this young lawyer took on one of the most powerful men in America, and though Hoffa managed to avoid conviction at the time, Kennedy's relentless pursuit planted the seeds for future legal battles. When John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960, he appointed his younger brother as Attorney General. Critics accused the president of nepotism, but Robert Kennedy immediately proved that he was not just a political insider, he was a reformer determined to clean house. His appointment marked the beginning of a historic offensive against organized crime. At that time, the Mafia's existence was still denied by many officials. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, for instance, had long refused to acknowledge the Mafia's reach, focusing instead on communist threats. Kennedy changed that narrative. From the moment he took office, Robert Kennedy made the fight against organized crime one of his top priorities. He restructured the Department of Justice, creating the Organized Crime and Racketeering Section, and pushed the FBI to devote more resources to tracking mob activities. Under his leadership, the number of federal wiretaps increased dramatically, and prosecutions for organized crime-related offenses rose by over 800% during his tenure. Kennedy believed that justice could not be selective. If America was to stand as a nation of laws, even the most powerful criminal empires had to be held accountable. Kennedy's strategy was multifaceted. He targeted not only mob leaders but also the economic and institutional networks that sustained them. His office went after corruption in labor unions, racketeering in business contracts, and illegal gambling and loan sharking operations that funded mafia families. He believed that cutting off the financial lifelines of organized crime would be more effective than simply imprisoning individual figures. One of Kennedy's most famous battles as Attorney General was against the Teamsters Union and its notorious president, Jimmy Hoffa. The Justice Department, under Kennedy's direction, pursued Hoffa through a series of high-profile cases involving bribery, jury tampering, and misuse of union funds. In 1964, after years of investigation and trial, Hoffa was finally convicted of jury tampering and later of fraud, marking one of the biggest legal victories in Kennedy's war against corruption. Hoffa's downfall sent a powerful message: no one, no matter how influential, was beyond the reach of the law. Kennedy's war on organized crime wasn't without controversy. Critics accused him of overstepping legal boundaries, of waging personal vendettas, and of relying too heavily on aggressive tactics such as wiretapping and informants. Yet Kennedy saw these measures as necessary evils in a system where traditional law enforcement methods had failed. He believed the Mafia operated like a shadow government, one that required extraordinary efforts to dismantle. Under Kennedy's direction, the Justice Department prosecuted hundreds of Mafia figures. Notably, his campaign against the mob coincided with the famous 1957 Appalachian meeting, where dozens of top Mafia leaders were caught by state police in upstate New York. The event confirmed what Kennedy had long argued, that organized crime was a nationwide network, not a collection of isolated gangs. Using this revelation, he pressed the FBI and Congress to recognize and legislate against organized criminal enterprises. Kennedy's aggressive pursuit of the Mafia also strained his relationship with J. Edgar Hoover. Hoover had long denied the Mafia's existence, partly to protect the FBI's image and partly because he feared public panic. But Kennedy's insistence on confronting organized crime forced Hoover to act. In response, Hoover launched the Top Hoodlum program in 1961, marking the FBI's first official acknowledgement of the Mafia's power. This shift transformed the federal government's approach to organized crime for decades to come. Kennedy's battle extended beyond the courtroom. It was also a war for the soul of American democracy. He believed that organized crime eroded the public's trust in government and justice. To him, the Mafia's infiltration of unions, businesses, and politics represented a fundamental threat to the nation's moral foundation. In speeches across the country, Kennedy warned Americans that corruption wasn't just a criminal issue, it was a civic one. If the public tolerated corruption, it would eventually destroy the nation from within. Kennedy's moral crusade was deeply rooted in his personal values. He was driven by a sense of duty instilled by his family and his Catholic faith, emphasizing integrity, compassion, and service. To many, his pursuit of organized crime reflected a broader idealism that defined his political career, his belief that individuals had an obligation to stand up against injustice, even when it was dangerous or unpopular. However, Kennedy's stand against organized crime also made him powerful enemies. Mobsters resented his relentless attacks, and some historians have even speculated that his efforts may have contributed to the animosity that later surrounded his brother's presidency and assassination. Reports and theories have long circulated about Mafia involvement in President John F. Kennedy's death, fueled by the belief that the mob felt betrayed after helping secure votes in key states during the 1960 election. Although such claims remain speculative, they underscore the depth of hostility Robert Kennedy provoked among criminal organizations. After President Kennedy's assassination in 1963, Robert Kennedy's resolve only deepened. Though devastated, he continued his work as Attorney General for several months under President Lyndon B. Johnson, ensuring that his anti-Mafia initiatives remained active. Even after resigning in 1964 to run for the Senate from New York, his commitment to justice never wavered. In the Senate, he continued to advocate for reform, civil rights, and social justice, expanding his moral vision beyond the fight against organized crime to include poverty and inequality. Kennedy's crusade against the Mafia left an indelible mark on American law enforcement. His work led to major reforms in how the government handled organized crime, culminating in landmark legislation such as the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act (RICO) of 1970. Although enacted after his death, RICO was directly inspired by the groundwork Kennedy and his Justice Department had laid. The law became one of the most powerful tools in dismantling organized crime families, enabling prosecutors to target entire criminal enterprises rather than individual offenders. Beyond the legal victories, Robert Kennedy's legacy in the fight against organized crime was moral and symbolic. He showed that the law could stand up to fear, corruption, and violence. His integrity inspired a generation of lawyers, prosecutors, and politicians to pursue justice not as a political tool but as a moral mission. Kennedy's assassination in 1968 cut short a life dedicated to reform and justice. Yet his impact endures. In the decades following his death, organized crime in America began to weaken under the weight of federal pressure, much of it rooted in policies and structures he established. His vision of a government unafraid to challenge corruption reshaped how America viewed justice and leadership. Robert F. Kennedy's stand against organized crime was not just a campaign of prosecutions and policies, it was a defining chapter in America's moral awakening. He faced threats, political backlash, and personal loss, yet he remained steadfast in his belief that the law must protect the powerless against the powerful. His courage, persistence, and unwavering sense of right and wrong continue to inspire those who believe in a just society. In the end, Kennedy's war against organized crime was more than a political crusade, it was a testament to the power of conviction. It revealed that integrity could challenge corruption, that truth could confront secrecy, and that one determined individual could indeed make a difference against forces of immense power. Robert F. Kennedy's bold stand against organized crime remains one of the most courageous and consequential efforts in American history, a reminder that justice, though often slow and hard-fought, will always find its champions.